What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Redbeard's Garage, and you guys probably haven't seen this on the channel in a while. The last thing you've seen us do was we put a club car differential on this and the 713cc Duramax V-twin, and the thing's a freaking hoss. It sounds like a drag car going down the road. But when we finished it, our neighbor had seen it, and he does a lot of yard care, so he wanted this to be his sprayer vehicle. But we never did finish putting rear brakes on it because this had factory drum brakes and we didn't want to run those. Well, they was mechanical and this has a hydraulic system on it. So, good friend Dave, who usually runs a lathe, hooked me up with some rotors and brake calipers off of some other side-by-side that was a club car. So we got these baby rotors that'll slide right on. We got these little calipers. So what we're going to be able to do is clean these up really good and convert these to hardline. So they'll go from hardline over to a distribution block that runs up to the front master cylinder. So that's the task at hand. He used this for a while. It's been sitting on our property for about 6 months because it don't have an e-brake, because the e-brake was on the rear of the differential. So when we put that club car one, it got rid of the e-brake. So when he's spraying, he has to chock the tires. So we're going to pull the bed off of this, and the rotors will simply bolt right on, and we just got to make some tabs for the calipers. Should be a really quick thing. And since it sat outside for so long, his master cylinder is stuck. The piston that pushed in it, so the brakes don't even work right now. They're like seized. So we got to pull that off, clean it out, and put it back on. Then we'll do a good rip on this thing, because this is a hoss. I'm telling you, it has some power. So we're going to pull the bed off, pull the wheels off, and we did wheel adapters. This has 4x156 lug pattern stock. The Mules do. Since we put a golf cart rear end on it, we had to convert it with wheel adapters. So we'll have to pull those wheel adapters off, slap everything back on, and then start making the tabs. So let's get into it. I actually really miss this Mule, like driving it around. This is a handy little workhorse. I'm telling you, that V-twin, this thing runs almost 50 miles an hour on the road. She's stout. These are actually Go Power Sports 150 rear wheels and tires that we ran on this. Just steel 150 wheels, super affordable. If you have a Mule, this is what will fit it. So, there we go. This is going to be so freaking handy. So what I'm going to do is come up with some tabs real quick and cut them out to hold this brake caliper. When you're mounting calipers, make sure you don't sink it all the way in there, because your rotor will hit this pin right here that holds your pads. And I may have some new pads on the shelf. I'm going to check. So I always like take a piece of 1/8 inch welding wire and feed through there and let it lie on the top of this, and that gaps it the perfect amount. And then we can just, these are going to be super simple because these tabs are just basic. So that's what I've came up with. These are, I think these are 5/16 thick flat stock. So it's going to be super strong. And all we have to do is make sure we have it set in level so we don't have the caliper crooked. And what I can do with that is shim one side or hook them up and go ahead and tension up the brakes, but that's a little bit more work than we have to do. So what I can do is just shim this with a feeler gauge just to get it snug and square on there. Tack both sides. Now this does have a seal inside of here, so we can't just weld this fully. What I'm gonna do is tack the sides of each of these brackets, and then I'll come in, tack the insides and make sure everything's good. Tack it a few more times, do a bunch of tacks so nothing twists, and then I'll weld one side, put a fan on it, weld the other, put a fan on it, let it cool all the way down. I mean, the seals probably need to be replaced in this, so I'm not too worried if I burn one up. We'll order new seals for it. Either way, that probably needs to happen. But so we can get these tacked on, all I gotta do is clock it correctly. What I'm doing is looking down the axle and getting this centered on the axle, and we can get this tacked on. There we go. Now I can pull the caliper, pull the rotor, bolt the caliper back up. That's going to keep everything from twisting. And do a couple little welds and let everything cool down. All right, so we had to end up going, these was the tires I let Lonnie use on his Deuce for a short period. These are steel 12-inch wheels with a 4x4 lug pattern, 4x4 or 4x100. They have 25-inch aggressive tires, and I think they look pretty sick on the Mule. We can't run them on the front just yet because I had to order some lug adapters. So these Mules have a 4x136 or 4x137. Both will work. Lug pattern. Well, we put a club car, golf cart differential on this buggy, so it has a 4x100 or 4x4-inch lug pattern. So what we did was took the adapters off the rear that we had to adapt that to these Go Power Sports wheels, which are 4x136, and just put these golf cart style wheels and tires. It kept it narrow, which I actually like for something like this. You want it, you're not high speed driving this, so you'll be able to fit in more places. And then I ordered for $100 some wheel adapters so I can put the front ones on the front of this later, so he'll just be able to drive it like this for now. We got the brakes all mounted, and Go Power Sports sells brake lines in all different sizes for this setup. And how I did the brake setup was factory. It had a hard line that ran right there. So I used a banjo bolt and a fitting. So this was metric, I think, 8 mil, and I put a little female to female and then ran a banjo bolt on this side that goes to a T that tees off to both the brakes. Hope you guys can see that. It's really hard to film this by myself. Topped off the battery yesterday because it was dead. This thing has a parasitic draw on it, and what's going to happen in a couple weeks, I'm going to have to bring this back and fully do a new wiring harness. Back in the day, I used to use copper clad aluminum. When that stuff gets wet, it absolutely turns to powder, and that's what's happening on this harness. So I'm gonna have to run a full new wiring harness to the front, rewire everything. Everything still works other than the lights. The lights is the only thing where the switches, the wires plugged up to the switches had failed. We put work lights on this, then we put a light bar on the front, and then we put headlights down there. So all that needs rewired, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. I want this thing to be nice for him. What we're going to do for now is I have to pull out this master cylinder. I'm not looking forward to this because the little piston is stuck in. I'm hoping it got rust on it and it's just seized in there. But if we hit the brake, it just goes right to the, so if we hit the brake, it goes right to the floor and don't actually do anything. So I'm going to unbolt this. I'm probably going to have to unhook all the lines from it, pull that master cylinder out. Like I said, I am not looking forward to that, and then we can try to see what's wrong with it. All right, so after that last clip, we actually got super busy working on this because the customer, the guy that bought it, our old neighbor, needed it back because he had some spraying he had to do. So he was really needing it. So we just rushed and got the brake master cylinder done. So what I ended up doing was pulling it off, getting the piston unseized, and it took a while. That thing was really seized in there. And we cleaned the bore. It didn't gouge it up any. It was just like a little bit of surface rust that had it seized. The seals was all good on the master cylinder. We basically pulled the piston out, fully blew it all out with brake cleaner, and cleaned everything as best as we could, sanded out the board just a very slight amount just to get the roughness off, and put it all back together, and it works great. We bled the rear brakes, and now we got the Mule back. This is actually like a week later. We got the Mule back to put the front wheels on it because the wheel adapters came in. So we're going to do that now, and then we'll take it out for a rip. Now that looks 1,000 times better than those V-treads. I really like these steel wheels. These are like golf cart steel wheels. You can get this whole wheel and tire set up for about $500, and it made this Mule look super beefy. We'll go throw a GoPro on and take this thing out for a rip.
A few moments later.
So the Mule looks freaking sick now. So one of two things needs to happen: a lift kit or a forward offset McPherson, like McPherson strut, because the tire, so I'm a heavy dude, so when I'm sitting here and there's a lot of weight on this and you turn it full tilt, it gets into the body. So may have to look at lifting it a little bit, but honestly, if you're mindful of it, it isn't a problem. But man, this Mule looks sick. It should run about 45. I don't want to over rev this engine. I can't even remember if we put valve springs in it, but it has a Mikuni no governor, and it's at 713cc Duromax. So we're going to take it for a rip around the woods. And I also did make a e-brake for it. Super simple. You can see this little rod here. It basically just goes over and blocks the brake. So you push the brake down, push this handle over, and then when you want to release it, you just push the brake and it releases it. Super sick setup. So we're going to take it through the woods. Here we go. Now, of course, this is a work vehicle. This ain't made for high speeds or anything, but she's got a ton of power. You can pull a trailer with this, no problem. It's a pretty sick vehicle. I don't like the riding, like how you're kind of cramped up here. Two people is really almost too cramped, because I like to reach over and grab the armrest So basically, if this was mine still, I would definitely either build forward offset McPherson struts or something, you know, to get that tire from rubbing. It only does it when you steer like super deep, so it's not a huge problem. But other than that, this thing's freaking great. I don't know if you guys remember, but I had to build the little doghouse, but you still have plenty of bedroom. I think it'd be cool to put like some type of air ride on the rear, so if you wanted to load it down with a lot of weight, you know, there's not a ton of clearance once we put the 25s on it. But I think it looks sick now. It performs awesome. He's got an e-brake, and also this thing would never shift at idle. You'd have to shut it off to go to neutral to drive. So it was because we didn't have rear brakes. Once we put rear brakes, you just hold the brake, shift it, it goes right in gear, no problem. So it was basically, the engine was stalling up the transmission that wouldn't allow it to shift. So we fixed more problems than we thought we was going to. So it's awesome that this thing is good to go, and it's a freaking hoot. 45 mile per hour, work around the yard. It's a great old vehicle. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. This Mule is a blast, but it's going back to the customer, and he'll bring it back in a while, and we'll do a full wiring harness on it, change the oil, change the diff oil, and just make sure everything's top notch. But the brakes, you know, like I said, we thought we was going to have to do something with the transmission because it wouldn't shift, and we do have a little bit of belt slack and everything, but it turned out it was because it didn't have rear brakes. Transmission was stalling up, and it was basically when he was holding the brake, it was trying to go at the same time, so it wouldn't allow it to shift. But make sure to check out the links in the video description. We've linked everything that we used on this Mule, those V treads and the knobby tires. We got both of them linked down there. These Go Power Sports V treads are pretty affordable, and if you're just doing stuff around the yard, they're great tires, and they'll bolt right up on a Mule with the 10-inch rear wheels for a 150cc go-kart. And we used all the brake lines. Go Power Sports has a ton of different sizes of these brake lines, and we was able to use their T. They also have that little brake line T. So make sure to check out those links. They do help us out. This V-twin is a freaking hoss on this thing, and hopefully it'll give Ed a lot of use. So thank you guys so much for watching. We love you, and God bless.